Hey guys, welcome back to another video. In this video, I'm going to be giving you guys my spoiler review and breakdown for Spider-Man No Way Home. I'm assuming you guys have seen the movie if you are watching this video. If you haven't, again, there's massive spoilers. I'm basically going to be going through the entire movie act by act, basically my favorite scenes from each act. Every single thing I loved about the movie, which was a lot, I'm going to be going through in this video. Expect this video to be on the longer side, and it's also going to be less edited because I'm going to give you guys my honest thoughts on this movie because I have a lot of thoughts. Before we get into it, if you guys are new in here, make sure that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you don't miss any time I upload a new video or I go live. But without wasting more time, let's get right into it talking spoilers about Spider-Man No Way Home. So starting it off, this movie starts off right after Spider-Man Far From Home, and basically the actions of Far From Home lead everyone around Peter Parker's life to be changed and Peter Parker himself. This is specifically shown in the movie due to them not getting into MIT. Peter, MJ, and Ned, and then also Aunt May is getting interrogated and all that kind of stuff. The movie starts off super fast and it just keeps on going, and this is where we get introduced to Matt Murdock. Daredevil himself is finally in the MCU, and my theater was ecstatic when he came on screen. I love the way they did his introduction, and apparently he was in the movie a lot more. I'm guessing there was a whole public court case that was in the movie but just got cut out, which kind of makes sense, but I like the way that they used him. I liked his dialogue a lot, and just the little parts that we got of him were so good. He says that you'll need a really good lawyer, you really need a good lawyer. Like, he keeps saying that, and at the end when there's a brick that comes in, he catches it with his hand and he goes, "I'm a really good lawyer." I cannot wait to see the future of Matt Murdock. I'm 99% sure we're seeing him in She-Hulk. Hopefully he gets a new costume. And actually, one big thing, probably the biggest thing that stood out to me about Matt Murdock's small time in the movie was, even though the characters around him like Aunt May and Happy and even to an extent Peter were slightly comedic, he still kept a kind of serious tone. And maybe it's just Charlie Cox's delivery of the lines, maybe it's just the way that he plays the character and stuff like that, but it didn't feel like a different character, even though there was a lot more comedy than we saw in the Daredevil show. So just from this little part, I know that She-Hulk is going to be more of a comedy show than anything. It still doesn't make me scared for the Daredevil character alone, because I still think they can do great things with him, because in this movie, the one scene that he had, other people around him were making a decent amount of jokes, but his character was still fairly serious. Now I want to move on to talking about when Aunt May and Peter basically move into Happy's apartment. This is where the movie slightly starts to pick up pace, where we kind of start to get the revelation of, okay, everything is actually ruined. Like, before this, everything is ruined. There were small things here and there, but then we see like actual repercussions, and the whole MIT, them not getting into it and none of them getting in at all, and it's strictly because of Peter due to recent events. We can't even consider your application. Like, there's a lot of small stuff that's all Peter's fault. And then Peter gets the revelation to go to Doctor Strange. Peter basically screws up the spell. After Peter screws up the spell, he goes on the bridge and he's basically trying to find the MIT admissions officer, and he's trying to give MJ and Ned a second chance. Not even himself. He's just trying to give MJ and Ned a second chance. And this is where the whole theme of the movie comes in. And this is why I truly adore this movie, is because the theme of it is everyone deserves a second chance, no matter what. Peter is giving the villains a second chance. He thinks that MIT should give MJ and Ned a second chance because it's not their fault. And just, there's so many things with second chances in this movie. And I think it's the perfect theme, because literally from the first second of the movie to the final second of the movie, there are second chances. And that theme is so prevalent throughout the entire movie. It's really well done. It's never felt like they're trying to push too many things. I think the main thing is just everyone deserves a second chance. And Peter is trying to get that second chance for MJ and Ned. And then obviously we get the bridge fight. Personally, I didn't watch any of the full clips. I watched the 2 trailers and that is it. I watched like a few TV spots here and there, but dude, this bridge fight, I am so happy I didn't watch it, the clip that released, because it was so good. I really love what they did. The action of this movie overall was great. The action of this movie was like just enough. Like, it was enough with each villain. It was enough going on. Like, for example, we never technically saw Tom Holland's Spider-Man and Electro fight each other one-on-one. Like, actually, like, we saw him shoot the sorcerer thing to put him in the thing and put him in the prison, and it didn't work. And then basically Sandman had to help him fight Electro. So we never saw that fight, but at the same time, it felt like we saw that fight because the whole mission was to get all of them. So he completed the mission and got all of them in prison. So at the end of the day, the stuff was finished. Like every storyline was completed. So I didn't mind that specific characters didn't get to fight with each other. That being said, this fight on the bridge was absolutely insane. I really did like it. I thought it was a really good fight, just like choreography wise, and then all the dialogue also at the end. I will say when Peter started controlling the arms, it got a little bit iffy for me because it just felt kind of weird. But then when he saved the admissions officer, that was really cool, and how that influenced her opinion and how she thinks he's a hero now and stuff like that. It shows the duality in people after they get to meet the real Spider-Man, which was really interesting to me. But we also get to see Goblin at the end of the fight, but then quickly we see Strange basically put them all in a portal, or not everyone, not Goblin, but we get to see Doc Ock and Peter put into a portal, and then he explains everything to Peter about how we got visitors and stuff like that, and all of that's really cool. But then this is where we kind of like transfer into what I consider the two-fourths part of this movie. I would split this movie up into 4 different sections, not even 3, like a 3-act structure. I would say it's 4. This second act of this movie, and again, I'm going on a 4-act basis for this one because I think that's what makes it really unique, and I'll talk about it at the end. But in the beginning of the second act of this movie, we see Peter, who's ordered to capture the villains from Strange. He basically finds Electro, he transports Sandman and Electro, and I will say that entire fight, like that whole wood sequence, everything, number one, the visuals are great. The visuals overall in this movie are phenomenal, and I'll talk about that when we talk about the mirror dimension fight that's later in this second act. But I do think the Electro fight and just the Sandman thing and how he's trying to explain to Sandman that he's not his Peter Parker and stuff like that in the moment is really good. Also, the jokes are so good in my opinion. Like some of them don't really hit, like in the very beginning, like the first like 5 minutes of the movie, they didn't really hit for me. But dude, Electro making jokes is so good. He was like, I can't believe like you're literally standing here watching me naked, and then they just have a whole conversation off of that. Like it's really well written in my opinion, and I really enjoyed what they did with Electro's character because he's funny, but he's also really serious, and he has that duality of like, do I really want to give this all up anymore, like when I could be a god like Goblin said, which I'll again talk about later when we get to that part. But nonetheless, then we see Goblin, and the introduction to him was all right in my opinion. It was crazy because my theater was actually going wild, but if my theater wasn't going that wild, I feel like I would have been kind of disappointed by the reveal because we see the helmet first, we hear the laugh, I think it is, and then we get to his face, and it's not like a pan up or a tilt to his face. It literally just cuts to Willem Dafoe's face. Like Willem Dafoe was phenomenal in this movie, by the way, but it felt kind of underwhelming, just the whole reveal of him. But nonetheless, we see Goblin, he goes to feast, and he talks about like the traumatic experiences of having Goblin in his head and having a different voice in his head and stuff like that, and that all is very interesting. But then Goblin and Spider-Man go to the Sanctum Sanctorum, and then Strange locks up Goblin, and Strange says that they all die in their own universes, but obviously Peter wants to save them. And this is where we get, in my opinion, one of the best fights in this entire movie. We see Strange and Peter fight in the mirror dimension. It is so well done. Like visually, this movie is top tier MCU in my opinion. Like also, I watched this movie in IMAX. I feel like more of this movie was shot in IMAX than Eternals, for example. Like when you're in IMAX, the border for the screen can still be smaller, but in this movie I felt like 99% of the time it was full screen. Like they were IMAX camera the entire time, and it really worked, especially in the mirror dimension sequences. It took up the entire screen, and it just looked so good. The fight in the mirror dimension really reminded me of Doctor Strange, and then obviously we see Doctor Strange the Multiverse of Madness's trailer as the second post-credit scene, which I'm not going to talk about too much in this video again because I want to make my own video on it whenever the trailer actually releases, because I've already technically reacted to it. I have my reaction to the audio, but I'm not going to post that, so I'm just going to wait till the actual trailer comes out to give you guys my thoughts and stuff like that. But nevertheless, the fights in the mirror dimension were really like just a step up from Doctor Strange 1. So I think that the fights in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness in these weird realities and dimensions are going to be even better than what they were in Spider-Man No Way Home. So I like that they're stepping it up. Just overall, the visuals of the magic and stuff like that, and the way that Peter bests Strange is just so good in my opinion. Like how he's pulling out the math and just it's really well done. It's a unique thing that only Spider-Man can do. No other hero or villain can think about it in that context, I guess. So I really like what they did with that. But now we see that Peter has basically freed the villains, and he takes them all to Happy's place, basically like a hideout, and he's curing all of them. them. He basically cures Doc Ock and he puts the new inhibitor chip in him. Him and Goblin are doing research, and Goblin, or I would say Willem Dafoe's Norman Osborn, because technically he's not the Goblin yet, and again I'll talk about that later, but Norman Osborn is having a good time with Peter. He's enjoying his company. He literally says, if you ever want to make a commute across a different reality, I would love to have you work for me. Just showing the connection between these two characters in such a little amount of time, which I really did love. But nevertheless, after Doc Ock gets the inhibitor chip, Goblin basically takes over Norman Osborn's mind, and then Electro basically decides to do the same thing. He's like, okay, I'm out of here. I'm gonna be a bad guy too. So basically, Ock wants to help Peter, which obviously at the end he does, but Goblin and Electro turn, and then at this point, all the villains leave, including Doc Ock, and Goblin is the only one that stays behind. And before this little section, like before everyone leaves and before like Electro explodes the window and stuff like that, we get this crazy speech from Goblin where I don't remember the entire thing, but the main thing I do remember is he says, we could be gods in this new reality. That really stuck with me because it really shows the pure intentions behind Goblin. Like in the first Spider-Man movie, he just felt like someone who had power and he wanted to use that power. That's it. But this time it's like he wants to use his powers and he's genuinely trying to be better than everyone else. Like there's a real sense of hierarchy here for the Goblin, which makes his character even more interesting for me. Now we get the best fight in the entire movie, in my opinion, like the best one-on-one. Like obviously the final battle is great. Like all the Spider-Man, phenomenal. But I will say Goblin versus Peter is top tier. That fight was so crazy. Like when Peter's absolutely bashing in Goblin's skull and Goblin is just like sitting there, like Willem Dafoe is putting on an absolutely insane clinic for acting. He's sitting there like just smiling, like he's so devious about it, and it's just so well done in my opinion. And then obviously we get the scene where May dies. I'm gonna be honest, I did not cry during this moment, and I think the main reason is because I'm not the biggest fan of Aunt May in the MCU. I just felt like overall her character was really just misused in Homecoming and Far From Home. And Far From Home, she was literally just a joke for Happy to date someone and have that kind of connection. But Homecoming, she was decent in a few scenes. But this movie alone really made me care for her character. And if I cared for her in Homecoming and Far From Home a lot more, definitely would have bawled my eyes out. But I will say that entire scene is really emotional. And that's the first time in a very long time in any MCU movie where I'm like, what the hell is actually going to happen? Because May was dying, right? And the way that they killed her off was really good in my opinion. Like Goblin comes in, stabs her. I was like, okay, she's gone. But then she gets up and her and Peter actually talk. She says, with great power comes great responsibility. She did not say it like that. She absolutely butchered the line. I'm sorry. She had like 4 words in the middle before responsibility, but whatever. That's besides the point, okay? The way she dies was so unexpected. And after she dies, Peter's so distraught, but then Happy's there, and then Happy gets arrested, and Happy's just yelling, "Run, Peter, run!" And then Peter gets shot multiple times. Like we've never seen this in the MCU, where a hero is completely turned on, and it's some of the best writing the MCU Spider-Man has ever had. And that's besides like all the stuff that happens later in this movie, which now I want to get to, like, I guess the third act, which is 3 out of 4 in my opinion, 3 out of 4 sections in this movie. And this is where we see Tobey and Andrew enter the MCU. And this is like one of my favorite parts of the movie. My theater went absolutely berserk, but basically Ned and MJ are desperate to find Peter. They open portals and then Andrew comes in right when my theater, like right when we saw the eyes, man, we knew it was Andrew. The way he comes in, and then when MJ wants Andrew to prove that he's actually Spider-Man, he sticks to the wall. She's like, do something more. And like she throws bread at him. Like, it's like dumb jokes, but it's actually funny because it makes sense. It's not that far-fetched. Like these jokes aren't just super stupid. And then after that, we see Tobey come in, and the scene overall is so good. Seeing Andrew and Tobey interact for the first time was really good. And that little like a miniature fight we had inside of Ned Leeds' like house, or like his grandma's house, or wherever it was, it's just really well done in my opinion. And I don't think they could have introduced them in any better way. I've seen a lot of people on Twitter say, oh, they could have done it in a more iconic way, but it's like, then it would have completely taken away from the loss of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. Like, Tom Holland's Spider-Man is absolutely down to choice. He's out for blood, okay? He's out to absolutely demolish. And if we had a super iconic entrance from these other Spider-Men, it would have completely taken away from that. And what I really like about this movie is the writing, as I mentioned before, in that scene where May dies. But we also have an absolutely phenomenal scene when all the Spider-Men meet for the first time. We see MJ and Ned come down to Peter when he's sitting on the roof where MJ and Peter lay down. And then we see Andrew and Tobey on top. I think it's of like a steeple thing. And they like jump down. It's so good. My theater again went absolutely insane. And this is my favorite scene in the entire movie, probably. I would say this one and the scaffolding one where they're all talking together are pretty close. But dude, they talk about loss. When they're talking about loss, Tobey talks about Uncle Ben and Garfield. This is, okay, I have to be honest. Tobey Maguire is like my favorite Spider-Man and Peter Parker just because I like his movies the most. But acting wise, Andrew Garfield is the best Spider-Man and he 100% proves it in this movie. He is so good, even in small moments, like just tiny moments, like when he saves MJ, like I'll talk about later in this video, but also when he's talking about Gwen and how he couldn't save Gwen, and even just the clinic that went on between Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield. Like obviously Tobey Maguire was great. He brought a lot of emotion in this movie, but you can tell that Andrew Garfield is just on another level, and then Tom Holland is right next to him, and then Tobey Maguire is right underneath Tom Holland. It's just the interactions between Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield were so well done, and just the writing overall was great. It felt like the Spider-Men were there, but they weren't there to overshadow the others, to overshadow Tom Holland. Now I want to move on to the final battle. The Spider-Men fight like initially, and they don't fight that good, and then we get a bunch of dialogue scenes, and I think actually this one dialogue scene about like Tobey's back is before the final battle actually starts, and it's so good. If I'm not mistaken, it's actually a callback to Spider-Man 2 where he thinks he's back and then he swings and he hits his back on a car and falls down. I think it's a callback to that scene, but I'm not 100% sure. Nevertheless, like just the chemistry and just like, even for example, like obviously we had the comedy aspects with Tobey's back and Andrew cracking Tobey's back, right? But at the same time, it's like we had Tobey giving Andrew validation. Andrew Garfield Spider-Man didn't think he was amazing. He didn't think that he was a great Spider-Man because he let people die. But Tobey Maguire literally said, "You are amazing. You are amazing. Just call yourself amazing." And obviously that's a nod to the title. I think that was a little bit of a nod to the title, but I still think that just the way they balance the writing with all these characters, it's like they still put Tom Holland at the forefront, but Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield are still just, they're so good. Like, I don't know how else to describe. I can just say they're too good. Like, that's all I can say. It's just phenomenal. And when we see these Spider-Man fight for the first time together, it is special. It is something crazy. And when they first fight for the first time, it's not like they don't fight well. Like they're not coordinated and stuff, and they're hitting each other, they're breaking each other's webs. But then they get together, they make a plan, they name each other Spider-Man 1, Spider-Man 2, and Spider-Man 3. Obviously, I'm not going to call them by that in this video just because it's easier to call them by their actor names, but nevertheless, they're making a lot of progress in fighting these villains and taking them down until Goblin arrives, and then Goblin basically blows up the box thing. I have no clue what it's called, and he basically like rips open the multiverse or whatever it is. He like the rips in the sky that we see in the trailer, all that kind of stuff. It's going down, and then MJ and Ned are pulled into the fight, and this is where the fight gets really interesting for me, because then it's like it's not just the Spider-Men that have stakes, but it's also there's other characters that are getting involved, and that's what I really liked about this final battle. And it's like there was no one else to save them. Well, obviously there was the other Spider-Man, but it's like they were already in the fight, whereas in, for example, Far From Home, Happy wasn't already in the fight. Happy was just out there and just randomly came in to save them. But this one, it's like everything is self-contained, and it feels like it works really, really well. And then obviously Andrew saves MJ. This was one of the parts. Oh, I forgot to mention, whenever Andrew was talking about Gwen for the first time, I like almost shed a tear. Like I was really close to crying. I probably had like 1 or 2 tears. And then now, like at this point in the movie that I'm talking about, when Andrew saves MJ, I was like, I had many tears. Like I was like, it was like a good, like I had to take my mask off. I had to wipe my tears away. Like, and it was a good like 2-3 wipes. Like it was happening. Like it was going on. And then obviously, like just that scene overall, it just hit me. Like Andrew realizing that he just like saved this girl when he couldn't save his own, like it was really good. Like, and this is again what I'm talking about with the writing of this movie. It's like I don't know how to like describe it per se, but it's just so perfect, I guess. Like that's all I can really say. I'm sorry if I'm doing a bad job of describing this, because obviously if you're watching this video, you probably already seen the movie, but I don't know how else to describe it. It's just perfect. And then Tom Holland's Spider-Man basically fights Goblin one-on-one, and he's absolutely demolishing him. He is it's crazy. Like, I never imagined Tom Holland's Spider-Man being this brutal and this ruthless, and he did it. He was going all in. He was not pulling his punches. And like Andrew said in the beginning or earlier in the movie, where he's talking about, I stopped pulling my punches. That is exactly what Holland did with obviously the death of Aunt May and Goblin killing her. And it was crazy. Like, I was like, my mouth was like dropped to the ground. I was so in awe that they did this with Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and I absolutely loved it. And my mouth was on the floor again at the end of this movie when I realized what they did again and how they set up the future. But again, I'll get to that later. And then basically Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man stops Peter from stabbing Green Goblin, and then Tobey gets stabbed. I thought Tobey was dead for like a split second of my mind, and then I'm like, they wouldn't do that. There's no way. He's gotten stabbed multiple times before. He didn't die, obviously. And then Andrew throws the cure for Goblin to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and then he stabs Goblin and he gets cured. And that's what I consider like the ending of the third act. And now we get to like the fourth act. I guess we could just call this a prologue, you know? Like, it's like after the spell everything is done, or actually, yeah, I'm just going to consider this a prologue, I guess. Strange is basically trying to save the universe. The only thing that can save it basically and save everything from rupturing is the Peter identity spell. And it's just so well done. The goodbye scene is god tier, and this is where I bawled out. Like, I took the mask off. I was crying, wiping with my hands and my sleeves, and it was over. Like, it was just, I had no emotion left after, because I cried so much during that goodbye scene. I didn't even realize I could cry that much from a movie. Like, the only movies I've really genuinely cried to I had like maybe a tear during Infinity War. La La Land, I've cried during that a lot, but you can't even blame me for that one. This one, the goodbye scene is just perfection. And then we have a few weeks pass by, which I thought was really interesting, and I thought it was actually a really good idea to have a little time jump. It was just a very little time jump. J. Jonah Jameson has said it's only been a few weeks when he's talking on the Daily Bugle, and then we see Peter go to MJ's work planning to reintroduce himself. But then once Ned walks in and Ned and MJ are talking about MIT, he realizes that if he tells them that he's Spider-Man and he basically reveals his identity again, that their lives are in danger and he'll ruin their life. So he basically deals with the consequence and just says, I'm not going to do it. Like, he's not going to ruin their lives. He has the opportunity multiple times, but that scene is just so emotional to me. And I really love the way they executed it. Just the music, the score, the way that the camera work was done, and how they pan back and forth between Ned, MJ, and Peter. And I just think everything is really, really well done. Peter moves into an apartment all by himself. It's an absolutely apartment, but then we see him picking up like police frequencies on his phone and stuff like that. And we also see this thing called a GED book on his bed, which means that you take that test in order to get into college. So since no one knows who Peter Parker is, he probably doesn't have like any records left with his grades and stuff. So if he passes the test, he can still get into college. So that shows that he will still be getting into college even though his memory is erased and stuff like that, because we know he's super smart. He literally admits it in the beginning of the movie. So we know that he's super smart. We know that he's going to college, so we don't have to worry about that since his memory is erased. But this is where it gets absolutely brazy. We get the new costume. Okay, we don't get to see the new costume. We don't actually get a good look at it, but we can see the light blue, the tights, we get to see the little webbing design and stuff like that. And then we get a final swing. He jumps out of his apartment and it's snowing. It's Christmas time. He's just swinging through the city. He swings past Rockefeller Center, I think it is. And it's very interesting because the finale of Hawkeye's final battle is also going to be taking place around the Rockefeller Center, which is interesting. I don't think they're going to correlate, but I just thought it was a cool type of thing that was going on, two things at once. But nevertheless, that's basically it for going through kind of the breakdown of Spider-Man No Way Home. Now I want to talk about the post-credit scene. I'm not going to cover the Doctor Strange trailer, as I said earlier in this video, because I think the Doctor Strange trailer is interesting, but I don't want to talk about it when I can't really show anything on screen without the video getting taken down. So I'm going to wait until the trailer actually releases, which will probably be later this week, hopefully. But I do want to talk about the first post-credit scene where we get to see Venom. Now, this picks up right after Venom Let There Be Carnage's post-credit scene, where we saw Venom basically chilling on the beach, and then he gets transported into the MCU. He sees the MCU Spider-Man Peter Parker on the screen, and then Venom says he looks tasty. And then in this post-credit scene for Spider-Man No Way Home, we see both of them at the bar, and then he's talking to the bartender, and they're basically talking about like how there's different heroes in this world, the Avengers, Thanos even, and it's just Hulk and stuff like that, which is very interesting to see another character learn about it. And we also saw this when the three Spider-Men were talking about the Avengers and how Andrew thought it was like a boy band and stuff like that, which is interesting to see all these other heroes who don't have other heroes in their universes hear about all this stuff for the first time. But nevertheless, Venom is basically taken away from the MCU's universe because of the Doctor Strange spell at the end, obviously. But we see a little like piece of Venom left, or a little symbiote piece of Venom left in the MCU, which is pretty crazy to think. But my only issue with this post-credit scene is like it feels like it's too unnatural. Like it just felt like Kevin Feige's excuse to put Venom into the MCU. And also it's going to be very complicated because why would we have two different Venoms running at the same time if they're both Eddie Brock and stuff like that? Like, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense to me. Like, if you guys understand what I'm saying, like, we're going to have Eddie Brock in the Sony universe and then Eddie Brock in the MCU and like Venom in the MCU and all that kind of stuff. Like, I'm interested to see what they do. And obviously this is just explaining the post-credit scene, but nonetheless, I thought the post-credit scene was interesting. Okay, so now that we're done basically breaking down the entire movie, I want to talk about just one negative I had with this movie. And I'm going to be honest because I don't want to just be like, oh, this movie was so phenomenal, like, oh, crazy, like, I loved it, like, I love the movie. But there's always going to be a negative to a movie. No movie is absolutely perfect except for like maybe one or two. But I will say in the second act of this movie, and again, I'm going off of a 4-act basis for this one, the second act felt really weird because it was trying to balance bringing new multiversal aspects into this movie, but at the same time closing out the whole Mysterio cliffhanger from the last movie. So the first act did it really well because it was kind of just focusing on Mysterio, and then the third and fourth acts also did it really well because it was just focusing on multiversal stuff. But the second act just felt really weird. It felt like it was in a really middle place, middle of the ground, and overall it worked at the end of the day. It just felt really, really weird to me. But other than that, I really have no negatives about this movie. I will say Ned was kind of weird with the whole Sorcerer Supreme thing. I felt like it was just a plot thing that was happening, which I'm fine with. I don't really mind. It's just, again, there's just these negatives that kind of like, okay, I guess I'm fine with it. Like, I'm not going to take away major points from this movie. But that being said, I would say overall, my first initial rating for Spider-Man No Way Home has to be a solid 9 out of 10. I think this is one of the best Spider-Man movie, top 3 for sure. Again, I'll be posting my ranking very soon. And I think that this is Tom Holland's best Spider-Man movie, best performance as Spider-Man. I think that this is going to lead to a phenomenal second trilogy for Spider-Man in the MCU. I think overall, just this movie wowed me in every single way possible. This movie should not have been possible to actually pull off. Like, knowing what this movie was gonna like have in it, like just all the trailers and leaks that we saw and everything, this movie should not have been possible to be real. It shouldn't have worked at all, and it did work. It surpassed all of my expectations. It 100% lived up to the hype, even exceeded the hype in my opinion. And overall, I can't wait to rewatch this one. But overall, I thought this movie was just phenomenal. Let me know what you guys thought of Spider-Man No Way Home in the comments down below. Just leave spoiler thoughts and all that kind of stuff. Just let me know what you thought of this movie. And basically, that's it for this video. Again, if you guys enjoy this content and want more content from me, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on. But that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.